Have you noticed this? Months pass. Everything feels like a relationship, but the label never comes. And you start wondering, are they confused? Are they unsure? You won't believe this, but for many avoidants, it's not confusion at all. Chapter 1. Why do avoidants avoid defining the relationship? Okay, listen. You know that situation, right? Months go by. You talk every day. You're emotionally invested. You're basically acting like a couple. But when someone asks, so what are you two? Suddenly it's, we're just vibing. Just vibing. Just vibing. What does that even mean? Are we dating? Are we friends? Are we auditioning for a Netflix series? Here's what I think. This whole undefined relationship thing drives people crazy because it feels like a contradiction. Everything looks like a relationship, but the label? Vanished, missing, gone like socks in a washing machine. And if you're dealing with an avoidant, this pattern is ridiculously common. Now, before we roast them too hard, because honestly, we will roast them a little, let's actually understand what's happening inside their brain. Because from the outside, it feels personal. But psychologically, it usually isn't. The big misunderstanding most people have. Most people assume, if they like me, why not just commit? Sounds logical, right? I mean, defining a relationship is not a marriage contract. It's just clarity, just words, just basic human communication. So why do avoidants act like you're asking them to sign away their freedom forever? Well, because to their nervous system, that's exactly what it feels like. No exaggeration. Labels feel like traps to an avoidant. You won't believe this, but for many avoidants, a relationship label doesn't feel romantic. It feels like pressure, like expectation, like invisible responsibility suddenly appearing out of nowhere. The moment something becomes official, their brain goes, oh no, now I'm required to perform. Now there are rules. Now there are emotional duties. And the funny part? Nobody actually said any of that. But their brain fills in the blanks anyway. It's like their mind writes a horror movie script. Step 1, define relationship. Step 2, lose independence. Step 3, emotional suffocation. Step 4, panic internally. Dramatic? Yes. Real for them? Also yes. We're just vibing equals psychological safe zone. So instead of saying, yes, this is a relationship, they prefer something vague, loose, flexible, non-threatening. We're just vibing. That phrase is genius from an avoidance perspective. Think about it. No obligations, no defined expectations, no future talk, no emotional accountability. It's like relationship light, all the connection, none of the perceived pressure. Comfortable for them, extremely confusing for you. But wait, they act like a partner though. Exactly. And this is where people lose their minds, because avoidance can be affectionate, attentive, emotionally close, consistent sometimes, but still allergic to labels, which feels insane. It's like someone saying, I love eating cake, but I refuse to call it cake. Bro, what are we doing here? Why this happens without villainizing them. Here's the subtle psychological twist most people miss. Avoidants often enjoy connection. They just fear what connection might demand later. Huge difference. They're not always avoiding you. They're avoiding the imagined future pressure attached to commitment. Their brain jumps ahead. If this becomes official, what if they expect more from me? What if I disappoint them? What if I lose space? What if this becomes emotionally intense? So instead of dealing with a problem that doesn't even exist yet, they avoid the label entirely. Prevention mode. Classic avoidant move. The hidden fear, loss of autonomy. At the core of this behavior is usually one thing, fear of losing freedom. Not in a dramatic, rebellious way. More like a deep internal discomfort with feeling emotionally tied. Defining a relationship creates psychological permanence. And permanence triggers their threat response. Even if the relationship is healthy, even if you're chill, even if nobody is being clingy, Their brain doesn't wait for reality. It reacts to possibility. Why it feels so bad for the other person. Now let's talk about you for a second. Because this dynamic is brutal from your side. You're sitting there thinking, we talk every day. We care about each other. So why are we stuck in this weird undefined limbo? And the longer it goes on, the more anxiety builds. Totally normal. Humans hate ambiguity in emotional bonds. Ambiguity feels unstable. Unstable feels unsafe. The irony nobody talks about. Here's the funny, slightly tragic irony. Avoidants avoid labels to reduce pressure, but the lack of labels creates more pressure for the other person, which eventually creates actual tension, which then makes the avoidant want more distance. It's like a self-fulfilling loop. Avoid label gives partner feels insecure gives. Tension rises gives avoidant withdraws gives chaos. Relationship math is cruel sometimes. Quick reality check important. Not every undefined relationship equals avoidant behavior. Some people genuinely don't want commitment. Some people are unsure. Some people are just wasting time. Harsh, but true. The key difference? Avoidants usually show emotional involvement without clarity, not indifference. Big distinction. Chapter 2. Why do avoidants avoid defining the relationship? Alright. Now that we've established that labels feel weirdly threatening to avoidants, let's talk about the part that truly messes with people's heads. Because this is where things get extra confusing. And honestly, slightly absurd. Defining the relationship feels like a point of no return. Here's something most people don't realize. For many avoidants, making things official doesn't feel like a small step. It feels like crossing a psychological boundary they can't uncross. It's not, oh nice, we're together now. It's more like, well, this just became serious. And serious means expectations. And expectations mean pressure. And pressure means I might suffocate. Their brain jumps from simple label, gives lifelong emotional contract in 2 seconds. No middle ground. No chill. It escalates internally fast. Why official feels emotionally dangerous. You might think, but nothing actually changes when you define things. Logically, true. Psychologically, not true for them. Because once something is defined, now there's something to lose, and loss is terrifying to avoidant attachment styles. When things stay vague, they feel safer. Why? Because ambiguity creates emotional escape routes. If it's undefined, it's easier to detach. If it's official, detaching feels heavier. More guilt, more discomfort, more emotional consequence. So their brain goes, let's just not go there. The fear of being trapped, even in healthy situations. This is important. Avoidants don't only fear toxic relationships. They can feel trapped even with kind, respectful, emotionally stable partners, which drives people insane. Because you're sitting there being supportive, calm, understanding, and they're internally reacting like, why does this feel like a cage? Nothing bad happened. Nobody applied dramatic pressure. Yet their nervous system senses restriction. It's not rational. It's conditioning, often rooted in early experiences where closeness equals loss of safety or independence. Why they stall instead of saying no. Now here's where things get really interesting. If avoidants are uncomfortable, why not just say they don't want a relationship? Simple, right? Well, because many avoidants are conflicted. They like the connection. They enjoy the person. They just fear the intensity of commitment. So instead of a clean rejection, you get vague answers, delayed clarity, endless let's see, professional level dodging. It's like emotional limbo, not moving forward, not fully stepping away, just hovering. I'm not ready, the classic line. Yes. The legendary phrase, I'm not ready for a relationship, which can mean 50 different things depending on the person. Sometimes it's honest. Sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes it's a gentle way of saying no. But with avoidance, I like this, but the idea of commitment makes my brain nervous. It's not always about you. It's often about what relationships represent to them: responsibility, dependence, emotional vulnerability, all their least favorite words. Mixed signals begin here. This is the stage where people start questioning reality, because the avoidant might act deeply interested, show affection, spend lots of time with you, share personal things, but freeze when you ask, "So, what are we doing?" Suddenly, they're confused, uncertain, overthinking, need space. Need time? Need the moon in 3 business days. And you're like, wait, yesterday everything was fine? Exactly. Welcome to the avoidant paradox. Why this feels so contradictory? From your perspective, the math is simple. If feelings are present gives defined relationship. From their perspective, it's more like, if feelings deepen gives potential pressure, gives caution mode activated. Closeness doesn't always create comfort for avoidance. Sometimes it triggers alarms. Yes, even when things are going well, especially when things are going well. Because now emotional stakes are rising, the pressure they feel isn't always real. This part is crucial. Often, nobody is actually pressuring them. You're just asking normal questions. Normal human questions. But their brain interprets definition as, now I must meet standards. Now I might fail someone. Now I'm locked into emotional responsibility. Even if you never implied any of that, their internal world is louder than external reality. The silent calculation happening in their mind. While you're thinking, I just want clarity, they're thinking, what if I regret this? What if this becomes too much later? What if I lose my independence? What if I can't handle expectations? Avoidants tend to be hyper-aware of worst-case scenarios. Commitment feels like risk. Risk triggers hesitation. Hesitation creates delay. Delay frustrates you. And the cycle continues. Chapter 3. Why do avoidants avoid defining the relationship? Okay, now we're entering the part that drives people absolutely crazy. Like hair-pulling levels of confusion. Because this is where months pass. Sometimes a year. Sometimes longer. And you're still stuck in, we're just vibing. Which, honestly, is a very cute phrase. Until it becomes emotionally exhausting. Undefined situations feel strangely comfortable to avoidants. Here's what most people completely miss. For an avoidant, an undefined connection can feel like the perfect setup. Think about it. They get emotional connection, companionship, attention, affection, someone who cares, but without the psychological weight of a label. No formal expectations. No official responsibility. No perceived pressure. It's like relationship benefits with reduced emotional risk. Of course, their nervous system likes that arrangement. Why wouldn't it? Why there's no urgency for them? You're sitting there thinking, where is this going? They're sitting there thinking, this is fine. Different mental worlds. Different priorities. Most people feel discomfort and uncertainty. Avoidants often feel comfort and uncertainty. That's the timeline mismatch nobody talks about. For you, undefined equals anxiety. For them, undefined equals breathing room. So while you feel tension building, they feel zero problem. Comfort without commitment becomes addictive. This dynamic can last forever because nothing is forcing change. Everything feels stable enough. No dramatic conflict. No major problem. Just emotional closeness without formal structure. From the avoidant perspective, why complicate something that works? But from your perspective, how is this working? See the clash? Both people experience the same situation differently. Wild, right? Why they don't feel the pressure you feel. Humans usually seek clarity for security. Avoidants seek space for security. So the thing that stresses you out, lack of definition, is often the thing that keeps them relaxed. Which is almost comically unfair if you think about it. You're over here spiraling. They're chilling. You're analyzing texts. They're watching memes. Life is cruel, but they act like we're already together? Yes. The classic confusion bomb. Because avoidants can behave very relationship-like. And they may talk daily, Share personal details. Be affectionate. Spend tons of time with you. Even act jealous sometimes, but still resist the label, which makes your brain short-circuit. You're like, excuse me, what are we doing then? Totally valid reaction. Why actions and labels feel different to them. For many avoidants, behaviors don't feel as binding as labels. Actions feel fluid. Labels feel permanent. They may enjoy closeness as an experience, but fear it as an identity. Being close feels okay. Being in a relationship feels heavy. Yes, even if nothing functionally changes. It's psychological weight, not logical weight. The hidden fear, expectations will escalate. Defining the relationship often triggers an internal script. If this becomes official, demands may increase. More time, more emotional availability, more dependency, more accountability, even if you never intended any of that. Their brain anticipates future pressure that may never actually happen. But anticipation alone creates resistance. Why they keep saying, let's just go with the flow. This phrase is avoidant gold because it protects their sense of freedom. No deadlines, no commitments, no pressure to define, no uncomfortable conversations. Everything stays flexible, loose, safe. Meanwhile, you're like, I have been flowing for 6 months. Totally understandable. Why this phase can last ridiculously long. No crisis gives no change. No forced decision gives no urgency. No label gives no perceived risk. Avoidants don't naturally rush toward definition. They drift toward comfort. If the connection feels pleasant and stable, they may see absolutely no reason to escalate it. Even if you're internally screaming, the emotional tug-of-war you don't see. While you're thinking, they're avoiding commitment. They may be thinking, things are good. Why introduce pressure? They don't always see definition as progress. Sometimes they see it as complication. That's the core disconnect. You associate labels with security. They associate labels with pressure. Why this hurts the other person so much? Because humans crave certainty in emotional bonds. Vagueness feels unstable. It creates self-doubt. Do they really like me? Am I wasting my time? Why won't they just say it? This ambiguity stress is very real, and avoidants often underestimate how painful it is for the other person. Not always malicious, often just blind spots. Chapter 4. Why do avoidants avoid defining the relationship? Alright, bestie. Now, we're at the part everyone secretly cares about. Because understanding psychology is nice, but living inside months of, we're just vibing, is not exactly a peaceful spiritual experience. So let's talk reality. No fluff. No fantasy. Just the mechanics of what's actually happening. What defining the relationship triggers in an avoidant? When you ask for clarity, your brain is thinking security, stability, normal progression. But an avoidant brain often hears something very different. It hears pressure, expectation, loss of flexibility, potential emotional obligation. Same conversation. Completely different internal reaction. That's where most misunderstandings explode. Why even gentle conversations can feel heavy to them. Here's the wild part. You don't have to be dramatic. You don't have to be demanding. You don't have to deliver some emotional TED Talk. Even calm, healthy, normal questions can internally feel like something is being required from me. Avoidants are highly sensitive to perceived demands on their autonomy. Not because you're unreasonable, because their nervous system is wired to guard independence. Why pushing harder often backfires. This is where people accidentally sabotage themselves. They think, if I just explain better, if I just reassure them, if I just push a little more. But pressure, even logical pressure, tends to activate avoidance. Their brain shifts into defense mode. Distance increases, communication slows, energy changes, and suddenly you're sitting there like, wait, I was just asking a question? Exactly. The more cornered they feel, the more they retreat. The brutal irony of the situation. Closeness is what you want. Closeness pressure is what scares them. So the harder you push for emotional security, the more unsafe they may feel. Yes, it's deeply inconvenient. No one enjoys this design. Yet here we are. Human psychology is messy. Why avoidants prefer slow, indirect progression. Avoidants tend to move toward commitment when it feels voluntary, not forced. Key difference. They need to feel like, I am choosing this, not, I am being pulled into this. Even subtle emotional urgency from you can feel like external pressure to them, which is why some avoidants define things only after absurdly long timelines. When their fear finally settles, why they can stay in limbo without losing their mind. Because ambiguity doesn't threaten them the same way. Remember this from earlier. Undefined situations feel unstable to you. Undefined situations feel spacious to them. No internal alarm. No urgency. No ticking clock. Meanwhile, you're aging emotionally by the day. Tragic mismatch. The question nobody likes hearing. Now let's address the uncomfortable elephant in the room. If someone avoids defining things for a very long time, what does that actually mean? Well, sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's uncertainty. Sometimes it's emotional unavailability. Sometimes they genuinely enjoy the connection but don't want deeper commitment. And here's the hard truth. You cannot decode this purely from behavior. Time plus patterns matter more than words. Why, but they act like they care, isn't enough? Because affection does not equal readiness. Connection does not equal intention. Comfort does not equal commitment. Avoidance can genuinely like someone and still resist formalizing the bond. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Painful but psychologically real. What actually helps instead of making things worse? Now don't panic. There are smarter ways to handle this dynamic. First, reduce intensity around the label itself. Avoidants react less to discussions framed as, define this right now, and more to conversations framed as, how do you feel about where this is going? Subtle shift. Huge psychological difference. One feels like demand. One feels like exploration. Lowering perceived pressure changes everything. Avoidants are constantly scanning for loss of freedom. So if definition feels like restriction, resistance rises. If definition feels like a natural evolution, resistance lowers. Energy matters. Tone matters. Timing matters. Yes, this is annoyingly delicate, but psychology always is. Why emotional security cannot be forced. No one, avoidant or not, can be pushed into genuine comfort. Pressure may create compliance, but not emotional safety. Avoidants commit when fear decreases, not when persuasion increases. That's the counterintuitive rule most people miss. And now the most important reality check. If you've been stuck in confusion for a long time, your needs matter too. This is critical. Understanding avoidance does not mean tolerating endless uncertainty if it's hurting you. Compatibility is not just about feelings. It's about alignment of emotional needs and timelines. You don't win prizes for surviving ambiguity stress. Because relationships are not psychology experiments, you're not required to become a behavioral scientist for someone. If clarity is a core need for you, chronic vagueness will drain you, no matter how much you understand attachment theory, no matter how patient you are, no matter how many TikToks you watch at 2 a.m. trying to decode them. Yes, I see you. We've all been there. Final summary. Avoidants don't avoid labels because they're evil masterminds. They avoid labels because labels activate fear of pressure, expectations, and loss of autonomy. Undefined dynamics feel safer. Defined dynamics feel heavier. But, and this is huge, long-term limbo is not automatically healthy or sustainable for either person. And honestly, if someone says, let's just vibe for 8 months, at some point you're allowed to say, bro, what season are we vibing for exactly? Totally valid. Perfectly sane question.